to this edition of Behind the Headlines. My name is Charles Odongotho. Today, Wednesday, the 29th of December 2021, the last program of 2021. And of course, certainly, the year is coming to an end, just shy of a new year. And we are going to be looking at the major events of 2021 and doing a projection of what is most likely to happen or to follow into the new year. We have in the studio the team already assembled. Let me start from my extreme left. We have Dr. Fred Muhumuza, who is an economist and teaches economics at Makerere University, Kampala. Doctor, you're most welcome back.
Thank you very much, and good evening, our viewers and listeners. And
I must say, on behalf of this show, that we sympathize with your recent situation. You lost your dear mom, and may her soul rest in peace. But welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, and next to Dr. Fred is Mr. Ochieno Joseph. Joseph is a writer, is a political analyst. He is, he says he's a life member of the Uganda People's Congress. Mr. Ochieno, you're most welcome back to the show.
It's a pleasure being here after a very long time, but this is home.
You were telling me shortly before coming here that you have taken about 13 months without coming to the show.
It's 13 months, and at our national broadcaster, it was nearly becoming a sickness.
Blame Mwenda, who wants to occupy the space more than you.
He's my brother.
No worry.
Grandfather. He will write about that. He's a writer.
Next to Ochieno is Andrew Mujuni Mwenda. He is a veteran journalist. He is the CEO of the Independent News magazine.
And most importantly, the old man of the clan.
A clan that he has refused to tell us.
It's
Andrew, you're most
African
welcome back
clan.
to the show.
It's called the African clan. Every African, every black person in the world.
Sarah says
He's a member of the...
it could be Bachwezi clan.
But this is too small a segment.
of the African clan.
Oh, yes.
Good. Next to Andrew is Honorable Mapenduzi Ojara. He is MP for Alaibi Bardege in Gulu City. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, my brother Charles, and greetings to you, the viewers.
Thank you. And finally, Council Sarah Birete, who is the ED of the Center for Constitutional Governance. Sarah, you're most welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Charles, and good evening, viewers and listeners.
Thank you very much. Let me say that 2021 has been, some people have called it a dead year, just like 2020. I don't want to call it as such, but it had its fair share of news. It had its fair share of so many things going around. I tried to just pick, just a few of the major events that happened. Towards the end, we are ending with Uganda, finding itself, or our army finding itself in the DRC to, to go after terrorists, the ADF. We are going to be taking a look at that, but we have had throughout the year discussions here and there on the Uganda-Rwanda border closure. That has continued for some time. The impact is enormous on the economy, on social relations, on diplomacy, name it. We will be touching on that. Of course, we had an unfortunate one, the death or the loss of, across the border in Tanzania, the death of Joseph Pombe Magufuli. And we then had, we had an unfortunate one in Kampala recently. That was last month. We had the bombings in Kampala, a number of lives lost. We of course had the general elections that ushered us into, that was I think the 14th of January, that ushered us into the new year, and that set the tone for a lot of discussions. But if you want to say the major one of them all, which continued from 2020, and just 2 days before the next year, we are still having it. COVID has ravaged the economy, ravaged social relations, and has impacted a lot. We will be discussing that, and we will be looking at the economy and how it is. That's why Fred is here. But let me start with the only lady on the show for starters. Sarah, what for you made 2021? Just quickly looking at it.
It's the, of course, shambolic elections. We started the year with the highly contested, highly violent general elections and ended the year with a replica of these shambolic elections.
I hope you will tell us in Africa which election is not contested. In
the name of Kayunga by-elections. I think what I would tell viewers is the standard or the minimum expectation of a free and fair election. Mm-hmm. It's free expression, free association, free assembly of the people, free marketing of ideas or program of political agendas for voters to make an informed choice, transparent counting and announcing, tallying and announcing of elections, to mention but a few, and an impartial body presiding over elections. These are elements of a free and fair elections that are always largely absent in our election processes in the country, and we see a deteriorating trend of democracy or increasing repression as a result, with attendant or coupled with a deteriorating human rights record that has attracted international sanctions for the first time on President Museveni's regime. And that's a big indictment on our increasing repression of dissenting political views and voices in the country. February saw, of course, the increasing repression. First was the filing and withdrawal of an election petition in the Supreme Court. We also saw the conviction of Dominic Ongwen on war crimes and crimes against humanity, but also the beating of journalists at the UN office by military police, which is an increasing attack on civic space in the country. Then later we went into the swearing in of the president and announcing of cabinet that has 44% women. For us, that's important in our quest for gender equality and a 50-50 world.
Is it something to celebrate?
Yes.
Okay.
Gender empowerment is both about numbers, space, and impact by women. We, 1st June, saw an attempt on General Katumba Wamala's life and unfortunate murder of his daughter, which was very unfortunate. And I think that was the beginning of terror attacks on Uganda soil again by the ADF. And later in October, November, we concluded with the bombings that drew us into the UPDF presence in Congo today to flush out the ADF bases. We also had the second lockdown on 7th June. We are still having lockdown measures, including curfew, including a limit on many activities of the entertainment industry, with bars and schools closed, among others.
Okay, first hold it at that. I just want us to first take a quick snap at each of them.
But if I may add just one key thing,
yeah.
I think we need to celebrate the Tokyo Olympic performance by our sports team.
The victories
saw, yes, Uganda win 2 gold medals, 1 silver and 1 bronze, by Perth Chemtai, and I specifically had to mention a lady. I think it was our first medal for a lady in Uganda, Olympic medal. Joshua Cheptegei and then Jacob Kiprima. I think we need to celebrate them.
Thank you. So there is both the bad and the good. Let me, Honorable Mapenduzi, Sarah calls the election that brought you, and you are known to be an opposition MP from Gulu, but the election that brought you to Parliament, Sarah calls it shambolic. Do you think that, is there something being done to probably repair that description if it is shambolic?
I want to agree with Sarah that, but I'll put it the other way, that the 2021 election probably has been the most challenging election. Going through,
compared to which ones?
Compared to previous elections. Yes, we have had challenges.
Was it worse than 26?
Well,
if you are talking about violence?
Not in terms of violence as such, but looking at the entire arrangement. First, we went through a period of, lockdown, a situation where some political parties were not allowed to even have meetings. Of course, some political parties had activities as if there was no lockdown, while others were extremely restricted. And therefore, the exercise became very selective, lopsided in a way, favoring one part and the others have to struggle. And then also most likely, I would say, the most expensive election, when political parties and political leaders have to struggle with, the use of the media. And so I want to agree with the statement Sarah made that the election wasn't to the expectation of the citizens. Yes, the exercise ended. New leaders were elected, others retained their seat, but generally, I think we should have done better as a country, and looks like we have not learned anything. So that then tells you that probably even in the future, we are still going to have a repeat of previous election processes where the ground is not level for especially the opposition political parties and opposition politicians. Some people are locked a day before election, and others are completely denied the opportunity to interact with the electorates. And so that qualifies the election to be just as Madam Sarah put it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andrew, what's your take? You can now start picking any of those, major events that have been touched on. By the way, we have one of the bad things we had this year was also losing General Paul Lokech, who was the IGP, the deputy IGP. So, but the rest have, and then of course a major one was also the serious thrashing of former Speaker Kadaga by former Deputy Speaker Olanya.
Was that a bad thing? That was.
You know better in Parliament.
Well, I'll tell you, the election of Right Honourable Jacob Olanya to me was something that this country needed. Okay. And I think the country is witnessing.
Thank you. Andrew.
You have brought the issue of the death of Lokech. First of all, you should know that Paul Lokech was a personal friend to me.
Yes, I knew.
And therefore, his death was a very, very, very a big blow to me personally, but that is unimportant. The most important thing, I think, that Uganda lost one of, I think, the best government officials I had ever seen. He was a man of extraordinary ability, extraordinary self-confidence, extraordinary skill. And I'm not even surprised that President Museveni up to now has failed to find a replacement for him as a deputy IGP. But on a good note, I think that the 2020 saw Uganda remove most of the stupid, I must say, hurdles the government had put in place that had delayed oil companies from making the final investment decision. So I believe that we are likely to see the oil industry take off. In 2020, Uganda government is put in place very stupid, unnecessary quarrels with oil companies over $67 million or this $1 million. You imagine our economy is about $40 billion GDP. This investment is anything between $15 to $18 billion, and you block a $15 billion investment because you have a disagreement over $60 million. I found it frustrating, but now we need to celebrate that finally government of Uganda woke up.
What are some of these specific hurdles?
I don't want to go into them.
Three of them.
They were petty disputes over taxes.
Over taxes?
Yes, because one of them was, if they're too technical for even a listener to follow, I should just leave them there. I believe that if it was, there are certain taxes you can waive in order to get a process to move, and the government of Uganda seemed unwilling to do it. There was some $67 million. You see, there was a dispute between the government of Uganda and Talo. If they sell, how much is capital gains tax? URA was saying, look, we will not allow the investment you made into this oil industry after you bought from Heritage to be part of when you are calculating the capital gains tax. We will not allow that investment to be calculated, in which case we will take the value at the point. It's like if I bought a house at 200 million, I renovated it for 100 million, I sold it at 400, and you say, we will not accept that renovation as a cost to you. We will charge capital gains tax on the original price plus the selling price. Whatever the legitimacy of the details, it delayed the decision for more than 1.5 years. And finally, the government of Uganda anyway finally went back to the original position. I should also tell you that, in fact, on each and every dispute they had, the government of Uganda ended up on a worse position than where it started. Yes. And I felt that there was nobody calculating what I would call the time value of money. You see, Charles, if I give you $1 million today, it's better than $2 million I may give you 10 years from now.
Yeah.
It's always better for you to take your money early.
That's true.
Than to hug over small things and take it after 5 years. Remember, Uganda discovered oil with Ghana in 2005, 2006?
2003, 4,
Ghana
5
started
there.
exporting oil in 2011. It's 2021, Uganda has not yet exported even a little of oil. I can promise you by 2027 we may still be quarreling with oil companies, which makes Uganda, I mean, there is, across the world, there is a precedent how long it takes for you from discovery of oil to export of that oil or production of that oil for offshore and onshore. For offshore, it is anything between 3 to 5 years. For offshore, it is anything between 5 to 7 years. Uganda has taken the last 15 years. It should tell you. And it is
so is there now hope for 2022 that something will work out?
Yes,
better?
Somehow I hope the spirits of our ancestors, many of the people who are Christian or Muslim here may talk of our land, Jesus Christ, but I'm a traditionalist, believe in the spirits of our ancestors. I hope that the spirits of our ancestors can inform our people that one of the risks we face is increasing technological change, and concerns about the environment may in fact devalue our oil, and in the next 10 to 15 years, oil may not be of any value at all. I do not know whether you know that Mercedes-Benz, Audi, Toyota, Nissan, the biggest automobile companies in the world, are all giving projections that by 2027, 2030, 2032, we are phasing out cars that would consume fuel. They are going to go into electronic cars.
So by the time we start producing?
Yes, there is a small company called Tesla by Elon Musk.
This richest man.
Tesla, its market cap, if I'm not mistaken, about 6 months ago, it was about 500 billion. Now, you realize that in 2020, Tesla produced 490,000 cars. The total automobile industry produces 63 million cars. Why? But Tesla's market capitalization, is larger than all the automobile companies in the world combined. Why? Why is a company producing the least number of cars having the greatest capitalization? It's because people are investing in the future. The future is with electronic cars, not these diesel and petrol-driven cars. And I hope that the government of Uganda realizes that very soon it may have nothing. That oil may turn into, it may turn into either cheap or, in fact, unviable for exploitation.
Apart from the oil.
So apart from the oil, regarding elections, I don't know why my granddaughter Sarah Vireti, I mean, please guys, you should know that President Yoweri Museveni does not draw his power from either the elections or the constitution. If you don't know that, you need to be living in the stars. President Yoweri Museveni draws the power to rule from the role he played in the armed struggle in Luwero to capture power. That's where his power comes from. the elections and the constitution were put there to legitimize his power, not to be a source of power. So whatever election you have in Uganda can only produce a result that he wants, not a result that you, Berete, and Bobby Wine and other people want.
Okay,
and I think
we shall be coming back to the quality. We shall be coming back to the quality of that. And Sarah is gearing to take you on. Joseph, take it up from where Andrew leaves it. Must we worry about the quality of elections and in whichever way it went this year, from whichever way you look at it? Your commentary on that.
No, very much. And when I tell you Andrew's
and what 2021 meant.
Indeed, when I tell you Andrew's my brother, that's absolutely the setting. Andrew's my grandfather. And in this done it. You know, the biggest shame that I have had this year was the process of the electoral charade in January. And considering that we went to January with...
Did you say charade?
Charade, yes.
Oh.
Consider the fact that we went to those processes with 54 Ugandans dead. And considering that it is what it was, Andrew confirms, we know it, and from UPC's perspective, we know it. But the more important point is this, that considering the fact that Museveni went to the bushes of Luwero in 1981, 40 years ago, on the basis of an alleged rigged elections. You take over power, unchartered power, uncheckered power, unthreatened power, and 35 years later, you are not able to organize an election, a semblance of which can have a sense of legitimacy that my good brother from Gulu is suggesting. That tells you that, well, the whole thing is a basic design. So it's very unfortunate. So that election process was, to me, very sad. Number two, it was also the first time in a very long time that I found myself in my home in Agongera and feeling rather uncomfortable in the evening, simply because I did not know what would happen the following day. Not really to me, but generally to the citizenry around myself. And it was actually shocking. It was a genuine feeling as I had, and particularly considering the fact that, again, for the first time, I could not make phone calls. For the first time, I could not access my social media, and friends and colleagues around the world were trying to get through to me, and they couldn't. It was rather scary. But that as it may, I want to say this. The Speaker's election. How the election of my brother Jacob versus my good friend and sister Rebecca could turn out into a competition. So election of speakers, two members of the same political organization, to take the process that it did, to take the country almost nearly to war, tells you how much of a mess the electoral process is. So Andrew is absolutely right. So to me, those were very telling at the beginning. At the end of the day, yes, we needed those processes to take place. But for broader Ugandans, maybe they needed to know that, well, it was basically just an exercise in passing. So I think, to me, those started for me the year rather in that manner in which they did. And like Sarah also said, Kayunga seems to have been helping to conclude the fact that the electoral process in this country is slightly much more of a charade than the reality. But going forward, because again Andrew said, the economics of it, the politics of it, the reality of it, the fact that this is a young nation, a young continent, I just rather worry that I don't know over the next coming year, and I think we'll be going to that, what is going to happen in this country, what is going to take to wake up all Ugandan citizens across the identities and across the classes and across the ages, that we need to have an awareness of consensus that perhaps may compel Mr. Museveni to realize that he's done his bit for this country, whatever it is, and that he needs to begin to set the new tone that should create a possibility that the politics of this country is reorganized in such a manner that there is a possibility that open political space, in a competitive manner, a political leadership emerges, a political party emerges as a governing political party with a leadership that takes this country forward, whichever political party, whatever political organization that is. I think that to me is the worrying thing. I don't see it happening, and maybe I'm preempting the conversation of us actually going forward.
Okay, we will be definitely coming back to them. Dr. Fred, the economics of it, the economics of 2021. First of all, what captured my attention, and you need to educate us. Good thing you are also an economics don at the university. We had an envelope, a national envelope this ending year, financial year, that is 45 trillion. And now the projections for the next budget is showing that it will come down actually. Is that something to worry Ugandans, that we are actually doing very badly?
No, I don't think it should be a worry to Ugandans. We are moving towards the reality. Because the 45 was overblown. The bulk of it will be borrowed. If you have your revenues, domestic revenues really stuck around 20 to 19 trillion, there is no point why you should have a budget of 45 trillion. You need to begin coming down to that reality. So I am glad that reality is coming through. Now that will come with cutting out a lot of unnecessary costs. We know this country has a lot of unnecessary costs. So the decline in the 2 trillion is really not going to be felt by the citizens, but possibly those who used to do a lot of nothing with a lot of money of government. Those fellows, I don't mind what happens to them. They can as well go home. The citizens will still move on better. And I think the other part is we are living in a political economy space, and that's why I like the conversation that has been going on here. The economy really reflects and is very sensitive to the politics of the day. And like what Andrew Mwenda has said, I don't know when Ugandans are going to realize that that's the reality, and then plan your projections on the basis of that. But also, while some Ugandans may or may not do that, many have, of course, they will try to live within their means, whether there is government or not. I went to visit one of my aunties, and she told me she can't even rear her chicken anymore. Because every time she used to have a cow, they came and stole it. She downgraded to a goat, they stole it. She have downgraded to chicken, they have stolen them. so she has abandoned everything now. Now, to that person, does government exist? And it's a whole village experiencing that. So for them, they have adapted to what can and should be.
Dr. Ampol, in the olden days, thieves used to fear stealing duck. I'm sure even when she tries keeping ducks, they are going to steal.
Yes.
So
maybe these days they have upgraded. So the reality is that
now the thieves are steal anything.
Yes, they will pick anything. So the reality is that Andrew Mwenda is mentioning are really taken in by those who are economic actors. And I think that is also partly going to influence Total's conversations. You don't want to come as oil investors, sink 15 billion into this country when it is not clear to you what the country's political direction will be post M7 or even before. So there will be some uncertainty there. And the investors really hate uncertainty. And we are seeing it in the kind of investments people are making, especially those from out. They are trying to invest short term as they keep watching the situation. An economy cannot grow on short term investments. So those signals are very, very clear. But leave the politics of Uganda alone. Look at the whole region. Everybody was praising Ethiopia. Now where is it? We are back in the Congo. Is it for ADF? Is it for how long? You have all these countries. Angola, Mozambique used to be a very safe country. It's not. Nigeria has failed to deal with. So Africa is really in that kind of situation where a lot of investors outside Africa are trying to make projections, and we're here to get into the projection space and say, what will this Africa be in 2025? What will it be in 2030? Should I go in? Now you're only left with a few Africans who have limited space of where to go, or they must invest here, also trying to invest here, but even diversifying outside the continent. So I think the economics and the politics are still going to move together, and there is that serious conversation of economics, development, and security. The two need to be addressed. And I want to believe, even before we get into the projections, come next year, security is going to be an overriding factor in this economy because of the internal and, but most importantly, the regional dynamics.
But the way security is playing in the region, and you mentioned security versus economics, is it helpful to the economy? Is it leading the economy to grow?
The two are supposed to be balanced. They shouldn't be this versus the other. You want to have both. As President Museveni has said, if security doesn't matter, go and try to invest in Somalia. And there are people who have invested in Somalia because there are those who survive in such kinds of conditions. So it is very critical that security is good in order to support the investors. And the economics should also be very good in order to support the security efforts. I don't want to believe Americans just left Afghanistan for the sake. It had become a big drain on their economy and the plans they used to have. So you can have a very good military, but if your economy is not doing well, you're certainly going to have challenges sustaining whatever security efforts you want to put out there. How do we get the balance? Going to be very tricky for next year.
Before I bring in your colleagues, I wanted you to answer the dilemma I always have. I have tried to study the economies of the first 11, 12 economic powers in the world. And I asked myself, is it a coincidence that they are actually also the first 11 invested in security or defense? How do they do it that maybe we should be doing or we are not doing well?
I think part of what they actually avoid is war itself. Because they know war can really decimate an economy.
They avoid war?
They avoid war.
Does America avoid war, the first economy, the first, the biggest?
You can see where their economy has gone because of the prolonged different wars they have been going. And I think that was usually the doctrine of the Republicans. The Democrats, whenever they come in, they try to avoid war and focus on the economy. That's an ideological thing, and in Uganda, you also want to discuss that. Look at Russia is lining up soldiers on Ukraine. They are not talking about fighting war. They are saying we're going to put sanctions on you. America of the past would have bombed Iran as they used to. They are trying to put sanctions. They are trying to avoid war going forward because they do realize war is not a good thing to have if you want to focus on the economy. And I want to believe part of the benefits of the European Union is to make sure never again will a European country fight another.
Okay.
And they are also trying to avoid internal conflicts that we used to see in the Eastern Europe. Going forward, they want to avoid, as much as possible, they want to avoid war now. Unfortunately,
yes.
Africa is still in that domain.
I want to come to your question. I personally think it depends. War is not necessarily bad for an economy. You may need to know that the United States entry into the Second World War led to an economic boom for two reasons. One, although the United States was a participant in the Second World War, it was not directly affected by war. There was no bombing in the United States. You see, like in the United Kingdom, in Russia and in Germany, there was direct destruction of assets because of the bombings that took place. 80%, I think, of the Second World War was fought on Soviet territory. So there was a lot of destruction took place there. Then there was the Allied bombing of Germany, carpet bombing, back to Stone Age. That destroyed a lot of assets. And then there was bombing of Britain. So those countries were bankrupted by the war. But the United States profited a lot from that war. By the time the Second World War ended, the United States controlled about 50% of global GDP, global output.
Because of?
Yes. The second thing about war...
Because they exported war to others.
You see, because...
And supported it with arms and all that supply.
Yes, and I will come to the difference with Uganda, because the United States industries expanded as a result of production of war material.
Yeah. And I need that relationship. I need that link with Uganda and how we can benefit.
This is what I'm coming to. So, in the United States, they had been in the Great Depression, and the New Deal policies had not yet gotten the economy back to its 1929 level when there was that crash. But immediately the war started in Europe in 1939, and America started rearming. They came back to full employment. By 1945, the United States was at full employment. Why is war bad for us? Because you see, Uganda, we are importers of all the factors of fighting. whether they are guns, bullets, and okay, I know right now we are producing some bullets in Nakasongola and assembling some tanks and the APCs, but by and large, we are dependent on importing arms. So the war, any war that Uganda engages in, does not stimulate the domestic economy because there is very little, except for food, there is very little input into the war industry by the economy. But perhaps where I would give Museveni and his government some, where I would sympathize with them, is that Uganda is a country that lives in a bad neighborhood. You know, if you are an individual like you, Charles, you can decide your neighbors. But when you are you can shift from wherever you are living. You go and live in Kololo or Nakasero or Sauliako, wherever you choose, but you can choose your neighbors. When you are a country, you can't choose your neighbors. Where Uganda is located, just look at our geography. You have Congo to the west of Uganda. The Democratic Republic of Congo has an absentee state. There is no state there in the east, or there is very minimum presence of a state. Look to the north, is South Sudan. The state has collapsed there. Look beyond the DRC and South Sudan is Central African Republic. It's a failed state or a collapsed state. You look beyond Somalia, it's not working. Now Ethiopia is falling apart. Let me tell you, the conflicts in these countries can have a snowball effect on Uganda. If you're a Ugandan strategist thinking of how to keep this country stable, you have to have an interest in what is happening in Congo and South Sudan, and beyond them, in Ethiopia, in Somalia, and in Central African Republic. Because the failures there can have consequences on Uganda and undermine your security. So it's important to invest in security.
Good.
The second thing that Uganda needs to think about, because I should also tell you that if you look at a lot of studies, they show that the growth in your neighbors has if your neighbors are growing, they are likely to add about 1 or 2 percentage points to your own growth. So the fact that you have neighbors who are malfunctioning also retards Uganda's economic growth. But Fred raised a very important issue, and that is the amount of money government of Uganda collects as revenue and the amount of money government of Uganda spends in the budget. I don't think Uganda's budget is 45 trillion. I think the total public spending is about 35. About 9 to 10 trillion, he can correct me, is rolled over debt. It's debt that we already have borrowed and already spent, but I think there is a law they created which allows us to roll it over but still count it in the budget. We can only pick the interest payments on it. The total budget, the actual money available in the kitty for spending this financial year, it's not 45 trillion, it's about 35. Even of that 35, if you remove interest payments of about 6 to 7 trillion,
it's about 4.5 trillion.
Yeah. So the actual money government of Uganda is actually going to spend on public goods and services, salaries, whatever it is about 30 trillion. I have a problem with the fiscal deficit of Uganda, not with the government of Uganda, but with the attitude we Africans have. You see, these countries of Europeans, over a long period of time, they graduated and came to build the legitimacy of the state on the ability of the government to deliver a large basket of public goods and services like health, education, pensions, and all these kinds of things. What we never know is that they came to deliver those things, roads, electricity, clean water. The state in Europe and North America and the offshoots in these other rich countries in Oceania, Australia and New Zealand, they arrived at that after they had transformed from poor countries to rich countries, when the revenues of the state had reached a certain level to fund it. Then you get a poor country like Uganda at a very low level of development and very low levels of revenue per capita. And it also says that the basis of its legitimacy is largely going to be the delivery of public goods and services to everybody. You know, the policy of government of Uganda is to deliver health care to everybody for whatever disease at any time. But public spending per capita on health in Uganda is about $15. My grandson tell me. In fact, if you get the total budget of Uganda and divide it by the population, it is this financial is $194. I will give an example. To the United States, it's about $21,750. $21,700. So the other guy is spending $80 million per person per year. For you are spending 650,000 shillings. The other guy is spending 80 million shillings per person per year. You are spending 600,000, and you are saying that the two of you will govern the same way.
And live the same standard of life. So,
Charles, to conclude, our expectations of our governments, it's like a child raised by a very poor family. but expects the father to provide them the same kind of lifestyle as to deal Ruparelli, the richest man in Uganda, provides to his family. I think those expectations lead our governments to permanently be borrowing and therefore living far beyond their means.
As a father, you have to provide whatever the mechanism. Joseph, Andrew went into other areas as well, but I wanted to keep with the issue of what we spend in security, or on security, or in defense, and what we reap out of it. Not that we want to export in order to reap, but that the situations we find ourselves in dictate we should, but expect that we should. Now, this is the question I want to ask you, and I will bring Sarah and Mapenduzi as well to comment on that. There have been complaints by some Ugandans that we go into South Sudan, we pacify South Sudan, or make it a little more peaceful, but Kenya goes in with its business people and they reap the benefits. KCB, the insurance companies, and Ugandans are not there. In fact, Ugandans are being tortured and mistreated, Ugandan business people, killed in South Sudan. Then we are now in Congo, and many people are saying, maybe the same thing will happen. The other day, someone was saying the president of Kenya Equity Bank sent about 100 business people to Kinshasa. They are already negotiating business deals. Ugandans, we are still busy fighting, and our brothers and sisters are dying there. Same thing in Somalia. Then the question is, what kind of peace should we export that we benefit from as a country, that benefits Uganda?
Well, that is if we're a country in peace. How do we export peace that we do not have at home? But just to come back to that, interestingly, my grandfather picked it up again from me on the politics of war and security. It is actually very clear, beyond what Andrew said actually. The big economies that you are referring to are actually net manufacturers and net exporters of arms. And these arms are extremely expensive. And some of these arms are actually the arms that impoverish these countries. And they're the arms that impoverish these countries and the arms that are used to test in Congo, to test in South Sudan. And once in a while, when we're given 1 or 2 tanks for cheap and for free, we think actually we're doing a bidding, usually perhaps for Anglo-America, and we think we're very powerful in the region. Number one. Number two, I actually take a slightly different view on some of these other things, including on Congo. I recognize that we had bombings in Kampala allegedly linked to ADF, and I really hope that we are dealing with real ADF in Congo. As Uganda People's Congress, I am yet to be convinced that that is what we are dealing with, and I really hope it is. But if it were the case, and if I was actually leading a UPC government in this country, I would possibly take beyond actually taking action to take out these guys. If there is insecurity, the kind that Andrew is talking about, what sensible leaders do and what sensible independence leaders did was to say that, well, our neighborhood is not in a good place. How do we come together as regional leaders to address the question of regional insecurity together, rather than being the smart policeman to go and do the whipping? That, in part, is part of the problem. But number two talks about the broader economic questions. You mentioned Kenya Commercial Bank. I remember there was a time about 10 years ago, actually on these programs, I happened to have been with a minister of government and a head of Kenya Commercial Bank on the same program. And I was rather uncomfortable that I had the head of Kenya Commercial Bank on this panel, and Uganda Commercial Bank is sick and dead. So now, if the banks in town are Kenya Commercial Bank, Stanbic Bank, which took over from Uganda Commercial Bank, that UPC built and founded to help build the economy of this country? You know, what are we going to export perhaps? Which bank are we necessarily going to export to South Sudan? Give you some thought. So there is an economic and a strategic economic link to this, there's a political link to this, and it's generally a matter of national strategic interest. What takes us to South Sudan? Are we going to South Sudan to show our other neighbors and our friends that we are smart at being an arms and fighting industry for which part of our exchequers may be helped? Or is it the case that genuinely we feel that we are in South Sudan because we are under threat from South Sudan?
Perhaps the question we should ask Charles is, do we have banks to export there? I think the entire banking sector in Uganda is controlled by foreign banks.
It's foreign. And actually, as Joseph spoke, he reminded me that another big story that happened is that one other foreign big company, MTN, went public at least.
Yeah.
We will be asking questions from especially an economic angle, business angle, whether they are going public with, is it 20%? Is going to open up the economy more into the hands of Ugandans, and whether it will do us some good. But Sarah was itching to respond from whichever angle Sarah come in, but I needed us to exhaust that point of what do we invest in to help our economy.
Okay, I will first talk about our military diplomacy in the region, which Andrew says is strategic, but once it's not balanced with economic interventions, like it has been proven in South Sudan, then you cannot harvest much as a country. And Joseph did help me with how the conflict entrepreneurs instead benefit from wars that they export, where you have these factories manufacturing military hardware and software that every other poor country is always purchasing to go to war. So instead you find you are heavily spending on war than benefiting from it. I want to use the example of Kenya, juxtaposed with Uganda's location and neighbors. Kenya's immediate neighbors are South Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, and the Indian Ocean, and to the south, Tanzania, and then Lake Victoria and Uganda. If you compare Uganda's, proximity with Sudan and Ethiopia, Kenya is more closer to those chaotic countries than Uganda. But why do we behave differently? Why?
But Kenya is in Somalia, you don't know that?
It is in Somalia, it joined after. But what I'm saying is for your reason, to say for us we must be in every war. I think Kenya would have more reason than Uganda to be in every war. So there are other reasons beyond geographical
but the internal
location.
dynamics of politics.
No, Andrew, you will have your time. So having said that, so it is important for the viewers to know that it's not just a location. There are other underlying factors. We have also fronted military diplomacy. You can see the conflict with Rwanda. The people managing that conflict are only military and intelligence agencies. There is no civilian institution involved in the conflict between Rwanda and Uganda. There is no statement of brief in parliament. There is no brief to the citizens. So there is complete undermining of civilian institutions when it comes to our foreign policy, when it comes to interventions, conflict, peace, or otherwise, whatever you call it. Even when we have civilian institutions like East African Community, it plays no role. For example, in the Uganda-Rwanda conflict, it's an intelligence matter. Even Ugandans don't understand the nature of conflict, save for the old man of the Quran, who has advantage of working with both leaders at top levels. I mean, how many civilians are involved? Is it a security conflict? Is it a military conflict? Is it a leadership conflict? Is it an ego conflict? Who understands? Who has a brief? Beyond intelligence agencies. So we have this kind of approach to our foreign policy that is a bit problematic and lacks checks and balances as far as institutions of governance are concerned. But beyond that, you asked a question on the economy. Uganda, and Professor Muhumza will guide us. Uganda's economy is largely thriving because of the private sector. At times there is little government intervention beyond policy. And even taking an example of the COVID stimulus packages, they go to the technical, the technical rules, the patronage networks. They don't trickle down to the general citizens that are not politically connected. So beyond the political connectedness, beyond the tax waivers out of patronage, beyond the loans that the politically connected access, a Ugandan is basically managing on their own. So we cannot genuinely reach at those economic strategic decisions, even to benefit in the regional blocks, in the neighboring opening markets, beyond patronage.
Okay, Honorable Mapenduzi, your people expect a government to serve them, and that expectation may be high, that expectation may be low, but it depends on the standards that they have at that time. Do you feel that what has been done in 2021 by government is, as we go into 2022, adequate to give some hope, to give some prospects that this may turn around people and transform them?
Well, it's not just, should not just be treated as expectation. First, we have a duty, or let me put it the other way, those in position of responsibility have a duty to provide the things that the citizens need. And there should be no compromise. The only problem we have in this country is, one, the level of commitment. That commitment we require from those in position of responsibility. That honesty. When people go to work, do they keep the country, in their heart, and they want to serve that country diligently, so tomorrow they leave a legacy behind? That is where we have a problem. And maybe before I get onto that further, just speaking from where Madam Sarah stopped, and joining with what my senior, Andrew Mwenda, hinted. Yes, my grandpa, please.
But we will have to interrogate that. Whether a Motoro can be a grandfather of a Luo, we shall find out.
Well, life is interesting. Don't rule him out. Don't rule him out. We are very much interconnected.
You shouldn't forget Oyo.
Yeah.
The name is Luo.
Yeah,
but he's a king the other side.
That's why I'm telling him to go slow. Don't
and he's the deputy of the king.
Give Andrew Mwenda the space.
Yeah. There is one important thing that has been mentioned by a number of the colleagues here, and talking about how much this country is spending on the aspect of security and what impact or implication it has on the economy. I think it's important that we all have to understand that you can never have a successful economy without paying very special attention to the aspect of safety and security. And just as Doctor put it, you cannot have any meaningful investment in a country where people are not very sure about what is likely to happen tomorrow. And so I don't think it's a bad idea for a lot of money to be put on the aspect of security and defense. It's not a bad idea. It only becomes a bad idea when we think that is the only thing that matters, and we don't pay attention to the other aspects. But also what President Yoweri Museveni is trying to do, I think he has speak a lot from our history as a country. When you see the president talking a lot about, security and all that, look back, see where we have come from as a country. We have had so many coups and all that, and civil wars. And so any leader who understands where we are coming from would never want to have a repeat, and especially would never want to be pushed out in a similar way. So it's understandable the way President Museveni is treating it. But going to South Sudan and going to Congo and Somalia and all that, definitely it's not a bad idea, as long as it's in the interest of the country to make sure the neighborhood is secure and you are able to interact meaningfully in terms of business and all that. It's not a bad idea. I think where we have a problem is when we begin to spend so much in a country like South Sudan in the name of first securing ourselves from any kind of activity that would come in, but also secondly, in the name of trying to create an environment that is friendly business-wide. And then we fail to take that moment, to use that. So when you go to South Sudan, you go to Juba and all that, a lot of the businesses are coming from Kenya. When Uganda plays a very vital role in ensuring, peace and security in South Sudan. So the discussion has to come back home and say, are we gaining from that kind of investment? And so if we are not gaining, where are we not going correctly? And that's where we need to begin to talk tough on the people we pay to provide strategic, direction. They are technocrats we pay. They are people charged with the responsibility of making sure we aggressively occupy that business environment. And we just reluctantly allow neighboring countries to take every moment and make good use, and we spend a lot of money. That's where I think is not fair for our citizens. But coming to the other thing you pointed out, I think as a country we're also not being fair to ourselves, because looking at our history and then looking at every part of the country, look at northern Uganda. We have had a very painful history. It's just a few years from the time we got out of. But how much have we done? Yes, you will tell me, we have had PRDP, we have had this, and we have had that, but why is it that even in June this year there was a study published, a report published, indicating that northern Uganda is still the poorest in the country, with Acholi sub-region taking about 67.5%, Karamoja is 66.5%, and then you go to it
and somehow it came to my book, Eddie.
Exactly.
There must be an explanation.
Yes. So I think much as we are talking about the economy is getting better and all that, let us deliberately begin to look at what kind of role each part of the country plays in propelling the economy. That is very important. And I think that is where government needs to start to strategically invest. We talk about many programs, but I think we keep on doing the same thing differently. We only rename them. Today we are talking about the parish development model. I want to wait and see how different that is going to be. We have talked about it. There are people who have paid a deaf ear. They don't want to listen. They keep on insisting, and that is part of the problem we have in this country, where people just deliberately refuse to listen and learn. Okay. Even when they make mistakes, they think it's okay. And that is where we are cheating the citizens.
Okay, let's take a break, a quick one, and then when we come back, I'm going to request that you keep the debate flowing, and feel free to interject, of course respectfully, and ensure that we have a fast-moving debate. And we are discussing the major events of 2021. Just to days left for that year to end, and we will be in a new year, 2022. Will the problems of 2021 be left behind, or we are going to carry them forward into 2022? Let's go for the break, and we will be back.
Everyone deserves more this festive season, which is why MTN Momo is giving you more Senku points on your MTN Momo withdrawals at agent locations. Get 150 Senku points for every 1,000 shillings spent in withdrawal fees. More Senku points means you get more free minutes, more free MBs, more free SMSs, and more free Momo Pay shopping. To use your Senku points, dial *141#.
Everywhere you go, MTN.
Introducing the all-new Roofing's TMX 500C rebars with cut and bend surfaces. Roofing's, strength of a nation.
Transact and win money after money with Airtel Money. 1.5 billion shillings in cash prizes up for grabs. The more you transact, the higher your chances of winning. Airtel Money. Instant, secure, borderless.
It's the festive season and we love it. And that means it's time to celebrate with GoTV.
Come with me.
So get your GoCoder and GoTV value for 25,000 shillings to watch with the whole family. And if you're feeling extra festive, upgrade to our best package yet, GoTV Super.
Something to look forward to.
Download the My GoTV app for more information.
Super.
We all deserve a super festive season. And with GoTV, there's every reason to love it.
Transact and win money after money with Airtel Money. 1.5 billion shillings in cash prizes up for grabs.
My name is Mulage Swahod from Tororo District. I'm so happy that I'm a lucky winner of the 10 million Uganda shillings man after money promotion with Airtel. I can't believe it. It's just like I've been reborn. It's the best day of my life.
The more you transact, the higher your chances of winning. Airtel Money. Instant, secure, borderless.
Shopping needs this Christmas, come to Capital Shoppers. We have a variety of items like gift hampers, foods, garments, cosmetics, and all sorts of drinks. Enjoy your shopping experience this festive season at affordable prices in our fully stocked branches in the following areas: in Tinder Station Road, opposite Makere Business School along Port Bell Road, Duster Street opposite Nakasero Market, and Garden City on Yusuf Lule Road. To all our customers and suppliers, we thank you for your continuous support. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Stay safe, wash your hands, sanitize, and wear your mask always.
Transact and win money after money with Airtel Money. 1.5 billion shillings in cash prizes up for grabs.
My name is Mulage Swahod from Tororo District. I'm so happy that I'm a lucky winner of the 10 million Uganda shillings man after money promotion with Airtel. I can't believe it. It's just like I've been reborn. It's the best day of my life.
The more you transact, the higher your chances of winning. Airtel Money. Instant, secure, borderless.
No.
We are back. We are back on air, and friends, this is Behind the Headlines, and the discussion was getting more fervent behind the scenes, and we are discussing the major events that shaped 2021, and we will shortly be taking a wild guess or projection of 2022. It should be quite possible for someone to say, looking at where we are, this will continue, the other will not, or something like that. In the studio, we have Dr. Fred Muhumuza, we have Mr. Joseph Ochieno, we have Andrew Mwenda Mujuni, we have Mapinduzi Ojara and Sarah Birete, and discussing the year 2021. Let's go back to Fred. Before we went into the break, I had got reminded that one of the biggest business stories or economic stories that happened was MTN finally opening up. Of course, there were a lot of discussions, pressures, open up, put in place more public, public accountability of your business, involve the local market and all that. Do you think that is a game changer? It has been described as such.
I am not very sure it's a big game changer. It looks like the expectation of MTN was not met.
Why? What was that expectation?
The amount that were required. The figures I've seen is, I think, about $251 million that was raised. And of that, possibly 100 came from NSSF. So you begin to speak to an economy.
And in terms of the volumes, the major part came from actually outside Uganda.
Yeah, so you begin to, so is that Ugandan? It speaks back to our banks. Can Ugandans really own a bank? And I'm really being sincere here, because to own an effective bank in Uganda today, you need very deep pockets. You need a lot of capital, because all your non-performing assets, which are huge in these banks, are underwritten by capital. The central bank would ask you to make a provision. So if you lend 80 billion out there, and the people who borrowed it are unable to pay, the central bank would just make 100% provisioning of the 80 billion by bringing in new capital. Now, if this was the old traditional Ugandan bank, you begin to try and raise money from your shareholders. This is what MTN has been going through. You possibly won't be able to raise that much. Now the central bank has even raised the minimum capital requirement, 150 billion.
Yeah.
You are going to see quite a number of banks really exit. It's not a bad thing, because in the law of the jungle, you must be strong enough that even when an elephant or a lion pulls you down, as a herd of buffaloes, you'll bring your muscles to bear on the teeth and claws of the lion. So it's quite a very difficult thing that speaks to what is the ideology of Uganda, the politics, and the economics. Quite often in the world, you'll find a portion of government deals with the security. And I think Mr. Museveni has done very well on that aspect. The conversation we're having, are we in this region fighting for economic benefits? No, it's mainly for security benefit. But the economics has not had clear strategy on how do you arrange it to also follow. So one of the things that Uganda has failed, and I think somebody raised it here, where our strategists, is we haven't had strategic economic policies that are geared on the ideology of making sure the people are part of the growth. Because once people are not part of the growth, your development and security begins to struggle. Because anybody becomes a culprit of foreign or even domestic kind of people take advantage of them. But when people are wealthy, they will be better off. So I think we have not linked well the inclusivity of the growth, that even when you want to issue a bond or a share like MTN did, there will be very few Ugandans participating. Not that because they don't want to, but possibly because they are unable economically. Now, how do we bring Ugandans to be part of the economy? That is the struggle of our strategic planning that has not come through. And as long as that is not readdressed, we are going to continue limping on and the economy will continue. I will just end with an example here. We talked about the European Union. One of their strategy is make sure we are not going to fight each other, because that drags economic resources. Andrew Mwenda was right to say after the Second World War, America was a major power. Then it went into all these wars that were not called for and lost out its economic gain. It's trying to struggle to get it back, build America again and whatever, but the dynamics have changed. So if you look at the European Union and the population that they talk about, we have been marketing the ESC by the population. That we are 200 million. Now when Congo joins us, I don't know how many millions will be. Can they buy donuts? Can they buy water? Because industrialization and manufacturing survives on sales. You must be able to sell possibly 10,000 or 100,000 of these bottles for Wenzori to survive. If its sales are going to come down to 2,000 because the population is poor, your manufacturing agenda, it doesn't matter whether you put electricity, you put roads, you build industrial parks, the survival of any business entity is its sales revenue. And sales revenue speaks to the customers. Now, if you go back and look at the American ideology, Biden is saying, build back better. He's saying for every year, there is an example of a woman who earns $40,000 a year. They're saying if you give birth, we are going to give you $300 per month. That's an extra $3,600 because you have given birth. Your child, when the child goes to kindergarten, we will make sure you don't spend more than 7% of your income. Now, they are trying to empower households with resources so that these households will go and buy the manufactured goods, keep the factories employing people, but also the people will be happy. The citizens are benefiting from the services Andrew Mwenda was talking about. Now, so it's an ideological issue, and I think Uganda is still trapped in between the rock and the hard place where you're trying to imitate the West. You want a flyover, an expressway to Jinja, so you are planning to spend some $800 million on that. And you've just done an expressway to Entebbe. Now you're going to charge, we're all going to leave it and go back to where we used to be. You have an airport, the Chinese. So what are these kinds of things that do not speak to bringing the people on board so that the factories can survive on their selves by the population that you have inwards, internally, and then you can leverage the region. So I think there are quite a number of ideological issues that making projections going forward, 2022 may look more or less like 2021 and more or less like 2017. You can even go back and count the years.
Okay. Joseph, next year, one thing that will stand out, of course, is Uganda will be turning 60. And at 60, that's a man who is now turning into... Hey,
if you are
retiring.
public service, yes.
So Uganda should start planning for retirement.
I'm told many people keep on changing their...
When it goes home as a retiree, what does it show that we have done this? I have lived from 1962, from 9th, some people say from 8th October, but from 9th October nationally. And now I am retiring and going home, and I'm taking so and so in terms of what I have achieved. What are those that Uganda will be priding itself in?
It's amazing because as I hear Fred talk, and I had a bit of Andrew, and to an extent Mapenduzi, I just want to put a very quick disclaimer. I sort of do not necessarily agree with the idea that we can sympathize with this regime because of some element of obsession around security based on the past. Really, to say so is to suggest that we've given Mr. Museveni an authority to invest in his security of sustaining himself. And I thought we nearly lost it on that. So I just need to clear that. And particularly, if I also look at how this country, in the last 36 years, how many years, say for instance, Northern Uganda was at war for about 18 years. I was one of those activists who sought to campaign hugely globally to end the conflicts in Northern Uganda. That war took a longer time than the total time UPC government was in power twice. And that was all under this regime. So think about it. But very quickly, at 60, you just reminded me, I hadn't thought about it, actually we're 60 next year. Look, between 1962 and 1971, there was a massively radical economic transformation in this country under the first Odongotho government, notwithstanding everything else. Talk about infrastructure, deliberate government policy, part of what Fred is trying to talk about, investment in our domestic economy, Uganda Railways was taken, Mapenduzi, it was taken from Soroti, within 8 years, from Soroti to Pakwach, including building Pakwach Bridge that reconnected West Nile with the rest of Uganda. The investments in education, major established, look at my Tororo, Manjasi High School, Tororo Girls, Busita Agricultural College, or Bukedi College, Kachonga. These are quick institutions around. 22 new major hospitals built, equipped, stocked, staffed, and satisfactory. Andrew was trying to suggest much earlier that, investments in some of these social services, you need to wait to be the big nation. Not necessarily. There was evidence that we were able to do that, and we did so, by and large, successfully at the time. I think my view is that this is a question of leadership. I'm afraid one of the reasons why I think Sarah was introducing the conversation very early about governance is that this country, we hope, at 60, we need to review our positions. We need to open the space in which there is competition, political competition, competition of ideas, where political parties and political leaders, and I really urge, and I hope that the debate beginning next week, January, is a debate around all political leaders, political party leaders, with their agendas and programs, to have a conversation about Uganda at 60, where are we politically, where are we economically, where are we socially, where are we as far as national security is concerned, not the security of the establishment and the security of the incumbent. I think those are the kind of conversations that we need to do. But if you take a stock, I would find it very difficult to give a credit to anything that happened in the last 30 years. And you are sitting next to Andrew. Andrew, massively impressive. Andrew wrote a fantastic piece about 15 years ago when I was much younger. And I remember in that piece, he actually credited my UPC government, thank you, Andrew, that up to that time, 70% of the national economic infrastructure of this country was founded or built during Milton Obote and or Idi Amin's administrations. Maybe that is when Mr. Museveni woke up to the reality of cheap finance, Chinese loans or available accessible Chinese loans that let me try and push as much as we can on the roads, because by and large, there are some roads around. But in that is a huge investments in corruption. And the corruption for which my beautiful sister-in-law, Betty, attempted a few weeks ago to tackle, part of the inherent things that Fred is talking about. And Mr. Museveni rebuffed her immediately.
You mean the idea of the lifestyle audit?
Don't go there, my daughter. Don't go there. Because those are the monies that are stolen. And as long as they're stolen, they're invested domestically. And if they're invested domestically, the question should not arise that we cannot sustain domestic financial institutions, domestic banks. So if we cannot sustain domestic banks, it means we've been told a lie in the last 36 years that Uganda's economy has been growing. So it's growing into what? Expansionist figures or really monies, real monies into the pockets of the people, capacity to build? Just very quickly. During the break, I was telling Fred that, can you imagine that just within 4.5 years, Museveni was in the bush, there was war, huge insecurity, bombs around in Kampala, many, many times. But within 4.5 years, Uganda's economy was able to be turned around between 1981 to 84. So that the first time in 1984, Uganda's standard of living rose since 1970. OECD figures, OECD nations came to Obote and said, look, you had planned that UPE would be implemented in 1991, a 10-year program. You can actually do it in 1986. Obote said no, and Obote told me personally that no, Joe, I said no. Why? Because we started the so-called third world schools. We believe that in 10 years' time, we should have the capacity to have the classrooms, to have scholastic materials, to have the teachers trained, to be able to afford to pay them without compromising standards. Now, that is leadership. That is something which is focused, deliberate. It is possible in this country. It lacks the leadership. It lacks the deliberate intention, really, to be able to put this country where it is. We are here by accident. These guys stumbled, in my opinion, into government. They've been lucky they've been all this time. At 60, it is possible for us to review as a country. That is something that we can do across the political divide without necessarily point scoring. I'm simply saying, particularly for the youth of this country, beyond 60, this country is possible. After all, the guys who founded this country 60 years ago were rather young people, you know. They were rather young people, but there was an open space for them to think, guide, including to experiment, the experiment that NRM attempted to say that kill political parties, we shall go monolithic, and now we're paying the price.
Andrew, sitting right next on your left, is a challenge coming from Joe, and that debate is a debate that you should be interested in. How would you score it? Politically, economically?
Which one?
The one of 60 years of Uganda, of which next year 36 will be for NRM. And by the time NRM finishes this term, it will have, I think, 40 of the 64. How would you ask them, whether you are asking them to score themselves, or what, in your view, how would you score them? Politically, economically, transformationally?
Let me just first of all comment on what he was saying about the Obote One administration. Between 1962 and 1971, the Obote government invested a lot in not just infrastructure, high quality infrastructure, whether they were hospitals or schools, whether they were factories and banks. It did a lot of work. It's incredible that in 8 years they achieved the things they did. The Museveni administration, which he calls the regime, I don't know why, the Museveni government, the Museveni administration, has not been able to actually, until recently, to build anything worth. You see, if you look at Sheraton Hotel, you look at the Uganda House, you look at the
Nile Hotel,
Crescent Towers, you look at practically every single thing was built then. And Obote took over government when we had about 200 kilometers of tarmac. By the time he left, we had about 1,500 in just 8 years. So I think Uganda has not had an effective administration in terms of building infrastructure, most of which actually the government of Museveni came and solved. We had a lot of buildings in Mombasa, in Nairobi, embassies abroad. Amin did very little. I would not take Amin seriously. Amin did very little. But the Obote One administration did a lot of things. The Museveni government since 2010 has also done a lot. You know, Karuma, Bujagali, whatever it is, they have come finally to realize that it's very important to invest in infrastructure. But let me say the things I can credit Museveni for. You see, Museveni did two things, I think, which have been really great. One, he was able to put Uganda on a long-term economic growth trajectory. That the economy of Uganda has grown consistently for the last 35 years. And if you look at IMF data, Uganda over the last 35 years, which you would say 1986 to 2021, Uganda's economy has been the 11th fastest growing in the world and 4th in Africa. I think that's a great achievement because development actually will come from long-term growth. Two, Museveni also stabilized the political dispensation. I think what had failed in Uganda was to establish a durable and stable government. Just imagine 1966, the parliament of Uganda suspended Idi Amin, who was deputy army commander, and the government fell. There was a kind of coup. In 1971, Milton Obote wanted to dismiss Idi Amin, and then it is Obote who fell. In 1979 or 1980, rather Benaisa tried to fire Mwanga, and rather to fire Oito Joko, the chief of staff. The government failed. 1985, Obote tried to fire the Army commander Tito Okello and a brigade commander called Basilio Okello, the government fell. So there was a lot of instability, the inability to manage the security and military situation and bring the army under either civilian control, but at least under control. It had run amok. And I think there Museveni scored those two great things. one, stabilize the political dispensation, and two, put the economy on a long-term growth trajectory. What I think Museveni failed to do for Uganda is to do two things I think has been very poor at. One, to ensure Ugandan ownership of the economy. So what he has built is really an economy that is owned by foreigners, and Ugandans largely work for these foreigners. One of the reasons why you have not achieved the structural transformation also is because so much gets externalized. If you have MTN, practically every single thing is owned by foreigners. At the end of every year when they make money, they have to send it to their shareholders in dividends. The second thing that Museveni has failed to do, even though he has talked so much about it, is to ensure that we add value to our products. Because remember that development takes place within the context of international trade. Charles, there is not a single country in the world that has ever developed by following the policies of North Korea, being isolated from the rest of the world. So development takes place within the context of international trade. And international trade is a value chain. Some countries produce cotton, others weave cloth, others market high fashion. Some countries mine iron ore, others make steel, others market automobiles. How much you earn from international trade depends on your position in that value chain. So if you produce cotton, you earn 2% of the international market price. If you weave cloth, you make maybe 20% of the international market price. If you market high fashion, you earn 65%. So what does it tell us? So if you are Uganda, you produce and sell cotton, you earn 2% of the international market price, you are a highly indebted poor country. If you are maybe Bangladesh and you produce and cloth and sell cloth, you are a middle income country because you earn about 20% of the international market price. But if you market high fashion, Louis Vuitton, Dolce & Gabbana, Hugo Boss, Emporio Armani, you are France, you are Italy, you earn 60 to 70% of the international market price, you are an advanced country. Now, I don't see policies in Uganda to move us from production and export of non-value added products towards adding value to our products. And for the last 350 years Museveni has been in the government, I see very little, if at all, any journey towards that destination. Local ownership and export of value-added products. And that tells me that Uganda, even in the next 30 years, it can continue to grow without ever transforming the economy. And when I mean transformation is to move from an agriculture-based economy where most people's livelihoods depend on agriculture to depending on industry and services, the movement of people from rural areas to urban areas. By the way, I was looking at the numbers before I came here. You cannot believe that in 1990, 70% of Ugandans depend on agriculture for a livelihood. In 2017 or 2018, they did the same study, 68% depended on agriculture for a livelihood. So you have not achieved what we call structural transformation, movement from agriculture to industry and from rural to urban areas. I think 70% of Uganda still live in rural areas. So those are the problems. Now, let me come to the final thing about banking that Fred was talking about. Fred, I actually think that the problem of Africa is I don't know whether we can overcome it. You see, we have come into the world when there are other countries that are so advanced and we want to adopt their standards. And in trying to adopt their standards, we actually do not build institutions and systems that relate to our reality. Let me give you an example. In 1913, the US economy was maybe today's equivalent of $1 trillion. 1913. And the US population was maybe 60 million people. Which is close to Tanzania and Kenya. And Uganda is about to reach 60 million people. Let me ask guys, guess how many banks existed in the United States in 1913? Can somebody here guess?
I can't guess.
In Uganda, how many banks do you have? 26. In America, they had 23,000 banks, of which about 7,500 were what they call national banks, and about 17,000 banks were what they call state banks.
Then?
Yes, 23,000. Now they have, of course, reduced 23,000. I just want you to think, you got France, Germany, and elsewhere. The banking services were available everywhere. But for us, we are saying that to have a bank, you must have 150 billion. And then there must be a mountain and list.
Don't you think they counted also microfinance institutions, all these circles?
I don't think so. These were registered commercial banks in America, registered commercial banks. But let me tell you, I saw them destroy Ukraine Bank here. And I tell Ukraine Bank answered many. There were problems there that could have been improved and solved. But it answered certain problems of the Ugandan business community. I can tell you, Charles, it is easy for me, Andrew Mwenda, right now to fly to London and borrow 100,000 pounds in 30 minutes. Or to go to American Express and borrow $500,000 in 2 seconds. And please, I mean 2 seconds. I cannot go and borrow.
Because that's an exaggeration.
No. I just log on to American, you know, I have an American Express card. I can go there and log on to the system and ask, can I borrow $100,000? And they would approve it in 2 seconds. And I mean 2 seconds. I'm not exaggerating anything. Standard Chartered Bank or Stanbic Bank right now can take the next 6 months. Even if I produce my grandmother's grave, I brought property, I brought whatever it is, they will still refuse. Listen, this economy, Museveni sold it to foreigners, and this is not your economy. It's not for me and you. Because you have these big banks, Standard Chartered Bank or Stanbic Bank, they have portfolio deposits from these DFID, American Embassy, whatever it is. They're not interested in you, in your money. Then they can maybe trade on the market and trade in the government treasury bills or whatever it is. But lending Ugandans to transform this country, the banking sector in Uganda, if I became dictator of Uganda today, I don't know what I would do. But I don't think this country has banks to serve the national interest. I begin with the central bank, which is controlled by IMF, the rules that are set in place for banking. You come to the banks themselves, these multinational banks which are controlled by their parent banks abroad. Their attitude, I'm telling you, any Ugandan, I can go to Barclays Bank London. I was a student there, so I had an account which I kept. I can still, one time, a man was selling me an apartment here in Kololo for $80,000, maybe let me say $80,000, because it was 180 million shillings. Then and he did the money immediately. I got housing finance, whatever it is. I could not get it. I bought a ticket, flew to London, entered the bank, Barclays Bank, London at 10 a.m., walked out at 11 with the money which I already wired to Uganda, and came back and paid. If I had tried in Uganda, it would have taken me 3 months to get the money, and I would have lost the apartment. You see what I mean?
Sarah has a question.
So if you want to deal with Uganda, this country is not a country of Ugandans. It's a country that is owned by multinational capital. The economy of Uganda is meant to serve not Ugandans, but multinational capital. In other words, the creation of the colonial state, what Nkrumah called neocolonialism, is most pronounced in Uganda. You see, in Kenya there.
The question would then be, where did the rain begin to beat us? That we don't have
between 1986 and 1990. One day you should invite me here. I'll give you a tour de raison of how Museveni moved.
Is it privatization?
Yes.
Is it the Bretton Woods?
I will give you
a tour de raison
of how Museveni and his government moved from the original ideas they had, which are not so good, but to another extreme of embracing IMF, World Bank ideas, neoliberal ideas on the economy, and in the process they missed the whole essence of Uganda's independence struggle. You know, the sale of UCB, the destruction of Cooperative Bank, all this, the elimination of local banks. I have a World Bank report of 1992 where the World Bank said that for poor countries which have weak central banks that cannot do proper regulation, it should be the policy of governments and international financial institutions to eliminate local banks and have multinational banks which can be supervised by the parent banks which are solid, take place. And that's Uganda followed that path, and that path has led us to a dead end.
Sarah, go for it. But I want Dr. Muhumuza to then come in after Sarah on, can we reverse such a policy? Because we keep going forward. 2022 is coming, another year will come, but can we say we are reaching a year when we shall take a decision and say, the Mapinduzis, the MPs, can we do a policy reversal? If the policies of IMF,
when Jesus Christ, let me tell you, when Jesus Christ returns,
when
he recline his kingdom.
I believe in him, but Sarah first.
Andrew, thank you very much, and I agree with your economic analysis. However, I think you're contradicting yourself on President Museveni and political stability. In your opening remarks, you told viewers that President Museveni neither relies on the constitution, elections, or governance processes to keep himself in power, and he will always do whatever he wants. Throughout his tenure in office, he has intentionally weakened the governance institutions, undermined the authority of the doctrine of separation of powers, and kept himself now with the military force at top gear in the January elections, in Kayunga elections, and the rest. Two questions. One, would you call that political stability or personal stability in power? Two, would you think that we have professional institutions that can be relied on in transition beyond President Museveni, especially the UPDF that is continually personalizing?
Do you want me to answer this question?
Yes.
You know,
answer it in 1 minute, because I need to bring in the rest of your colleagues.
You know, I do not have evidence about the future. So he's asking me in the future, can we have...
None of us has.
Yes. I don't have evidence. So
we are doing projections.
In social science, I must use the past, and I must look at geographic space and historic time to predict.
In order to predict.
Yes, and I always said, you see, to understand the Museveni administration, you need to understand it in its specificity, that this is a government that took up arms, or a revolutionary movement that took arms and fought a protracted war and captured power. So for me to tell you about the most likely outcomes is I look at similar governments in Cuba, in North Korea, in Vietnam, in China, in the former Soviet Union, in Nicaragua, in Rwanda, in Eritrea, Ethiopia, Angola, Mozambique, and Zambia. So already, or Guinea-Bissau and Algeria. Those are the countries that I know that came to power like that. They have specific characteristics, Sarah, that give me confidence that Uganda has a high chance of having a peaceful transition. Why? In all of them, the founding leader is the political head, is the ideological philosopher, but is also the military commander. Once they capture power and consolidate after 5 years, they never lose it. And that founding leader who centralizes power in the presidency and personalizes it in his hands, whether it's a Mao, a Ho Chi Minh, or a Stalin, you may think that if he is away, if he dies, then everything will fall apart. But each time they have died, what we see is the emergence of a leadership by college. A college of his peers come and take over, whether it's Samora Machel has died in Mozambique, or Fidel Castro has retired in Cuba, or Chairman Mao died in China, or Stalin died in Russia. They have a particular way they work. So that's the evidence I can use. And therefore, it gives me confidence that NRM coming from the same stable has a higher chance, maybe a 90% chance, or even a 95% chance, that even if Museveni left, the system was designed, its security apparatus, its military infrastructure, its political base, it will provide Uganda with a stable transition. Because that is what we have seen about these systems. I don't have evidence about the future. I can only use the past, other countries, other political systems similar to Uganda.
Okay. Dr. Muhumuza, the question of the need or the proposal or the thinking to reverse policies has been discussed before or made before, but it has not been done. I want you to bring us to your own view, especially given your experience. You were in Ministry of Finance, the leader in economic planning and all that for the country. If the kind of thing Sarah and Joseph and all this, Andrew, are talking is what is happening, why can't we change and say this is what can best transform our country? Because going into 2022, what we are talking about most is economic transformation of our people. But if 60 years down the road, there is no consensus on just the basics, development or growth for this country, how then better can we do it?
I think it's an interesting conversation, really, and the answer lies on where Andrew Mwenda has ended. He may have been tracking it differently, but I've seen the similar thing on the same countries that he's talking about. When do they begin on the economic transformation journey? To begin talking about and bringing in the ideology and the policies that speak to the country's community and population. It's after the initial leader has left and either college or success has come. Look at Angola. Dos Santos leaves. Now they are looking at it differently. Look at Cuba. They begin conversations with the US. Look at China itself. When Mao died, they brought in the conversation differently. The economics became strong. So I've also been tracking that, but from the economic angle. So these policies you're talking about may not necessarily change as long as the status quo continues. But the post-Museveni era may begin to bring in those conversations. And there is a lot of feeling going by what I see and hear in the conversations on really trying to bring in the communities. Today, I really decided to put on my shirt from World Vision. I chaired the board of World Vision for quite a number of years.
Is it a local entity?
It's a World Vision.
it is for the world.
And most of these entities are localized. And this is why really I'm going to come to this. I was more of a student than a chair of the board. Because I wanted to see the model and the design of World Vision as an entity. Because I've done research on a number of NGOs. There are those who will come support a child and support one child in a family. Pay fees for that child, give that child a mosquito net, and really it doesn't work. I don't want to mention names here. World Vision may come and have 500 supported children in a community. But they will use this money to build schools, improve water points, improve health facilities, because a child belongs to the community.
Yeah.
So this is the ideology we are saying. Are we going to see our future beginning to say, don't just put a road that runs from Kampala to Gulu? What is the impact of that road on the community where it is passing? I know Mapinduzi here will tell you. We have invested little, if anything, in community access roads, in district roads. Yeah, these are the very roads that will bring the main highway to life. Because that's where the melon lives, the 2 kilometers off this side road, to actually make the community get a feel of it. So until we get to that ideology of investing in communities, and doesn't matter, and when I talk about value addition can be the next stage. First, ramp up your level of production. Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, the two produce almost the world's cocoa. They get 6% of that value. Now they are beginning to negotiate how to increase their value. But Côte d'Ivoire alone gets $3.7 to $4 billion per year out of cocoa. They are 6%. That's much more than our oil that we expect to get. So first pick that and get on that value chain. Specialize in your area, pick out the value that you can, and then begin to argue for the next step. So I think it's going to become a conversation on where do we go. Now, you was talking about Kenya, Equity Bank, and the circles that he was talking about. We have so many of them here. But without us shifting gears to say, let's purpose to have the cooperative movement back. And the commitment, not just petty talk. You won't be able to build the banks you're talking about. Because the people have small monies, but put together they can run these banks.
Okay.
The ideology we are following is not just necessarily an IMF bank. Why does Barclays London give Andrew Mwenda money quickly? Barclays London exited Africa. When you come down and look at Africans, what is the productivity? The conversation that I talked about. You are borrowing money to build an apartment. I expect you to pay me through rent. Where are the potential people that are going to rent that apartment? I would come and scan your environment. There are so many empty ones. There are so many incomplete ones. So the possibility that you would default is really very big. So you scan the nature of the economy and you can buffer up. And Rumenda can pick money from Barclays London. It's okay because they have a global profile where they will underwrite in case he fails to pay. But also, they looked at the nature of investment. Kololo is a good place, certainly. But the real estate in Uganda is really limping, and going by projections in future is going to be one of those critical areas that is going to really bring us a lot of other problems. So we have inherent risks, a conversation around them.
We don't have inherent risks. We have a perception of inherent risks.
No, they are inherent risks.
Let me tell you.
You can perceive them, but they are
in the business of borders. Don't you think a border is the most risky thing?
No, it's not. It's most profitable, by the way. I encourage people to invest in them rather than houses.
Let me tell you, I'm a founder.
I wasn't broke for 3 years when I ran 2.
Let me tell you, I'm a founder. I'm one of the founders of Uganda. So what do? We get a young person, we give you we give you an asset from which you derive your income, we loan you money, without you having to pay. You don't give us security. You don't even pay a 30% or 20% deposit. We give you a bike, you ride it every week, you give us, let's say, 80,000 or 70,000 shillings, and after 20 months, you own. Everywhere we went in this country, except Ukraine, they said, this is a very risky business, we cannot lend it, because you don't have security, you don't have anything, people run away with bikes. Before COVID came and distorted the market, compliance rates were 99%, collection rates 99%. Everybody pays their loan, everything goes well. So you would imagine that border riders, whom we assume have a lot of accidents, you don't have their address, they are footloose, they are very difficult to lend. You get it? What of my grandson Joseph here, who has a house in Kololo, has a block of apartments in Nigeria, whatever it is, even with those properties, he can't borrow from banks of Uganda. Please, guys,
We're
these
talking
banks.
about business risk here.
Yes,
there
but
is
it's
no
what I'm saying.
business risk on borders.
Why?
Nothing.
But the banks said there was business risk.
No,
the banks
those are your
lend
banks.
us. Yes,
Those
the
are the banks, and
Ugandan
that's the
banks
issue you want to address.
refused to lend us, saying there was risk. I think that there is.
Because they have the old boxes to tick.
Yes.
They have rules that these rules.
Those are issues
Those
you
are
want
the
to
ones
deal
I'm
with.
talking about.
And those
The
are
boxes
regulations
refer
and
to the
rules.
rules or their old policies.
The rules of the banks themselves, the rules of the central bank are
yes,
combined to make banks very irrelevant to the business realities of Uganda.
There is a big truth to that.
Okay. Joseph, you were raising your hand. I needed, because I'm enjoying the discussion, but nonetheless, the year 2021 is running so fast. We are entering midnight. It wants to end like now.
It has
so
to end
I will
anyway.
give Joseph 1 minute and Mapenduzi 1 minute, and then I will read some messages from the public and then come back to you guys to make final.
Mapinduzi has a very wrong name. Mapinduzi means change. Am I correct?
Very correct.
And you know this country believes in no change.
So he is not supposed to exist.
Probably after the show.
He's a threat to the status quo.
But the country is changing anyway.
So life generally is a continuous change. Life is ever changing. Joseph.
But no, very quickly, I just wanted to say that actually the NRM was an attempted a process that actually failed and failed from the bush. Because, Andrew, the NRM is not, you can't compare NRM with Cuba or with China. That's number one. Number two, you yourself suggested...
Why can't he?
No, because there was no revolution that took place in Uganda. And it was an attempt, allegedly a revolutionary organization in the bush, including the attempts in Luwero. But it wasn't a revolution. It was
so what took place?
No, basically Museveni went to the bush, caught some kind of luck, got a base in Buganda. It was very close to Kampala. The government was about to defeat them by accident, as you rightly say. I think Andrew said government fell thanks to DP and a few other people.
But I've read some books that say that actually the NRA or NRM revolution is one of the most studied in terms of its formation, how it went to the bush, how it mobilized against the government, the sitting government, how it mobilized the people and organized them, this whole LC system.
In Luwero. Was it in Gulu?
Luwero, the LC system.
Was it in Gulu? Was it in Gulu? Was it in Tororo? Was it in Jinja? Was it?
No, I think strategic direction demands that when you're going to do something like that, you look for the place that is most conducive for your outfit.
It wasn't luck.
The quick point really... No, it was an accident. It was an accident.
No.
And this guy stumbled in government, and that's why they had to experiment with it.
I want to keep with that, but Joseph, you see why I have a problem with that kind of narrative is that especially the opposition keep saying that the NRM is an accident, they are not thoughtful, they are not strategic, and here they are. By 2016, they are in power for 40 years. Through an accident for 40 years?
It's an accident that succeeded. But really my point is, this is the point. And the point is not a political point. The point is simply this, that I don't see NRM leadership emerging like what happened with the Cubans and or with the Chinese. And after,
if it was an accident, them capturing power, has it been an accident for them to hold it for 40 years?
Oh, no, it wasn't because of military power. These guys consolidated it. Sarah talked about it. Yourself talked about it. No, because look, military versus civilians, it's just common sense that somebody is armed, the other person is trying to persuade you kindly to not have it.
UPC had control over the military and lost that control.
Indeed, but really, my point is, because I really don't have the time, my point really is this, that going forward with the possibilities of this in this country, that what Fred was trying to talk about, how do we change it? Because of the question that we're asking, I think to go around, we'll have to demystify this NRM myth, demystify the myths myths around really the political history of our country and create a position 60 years going forward that actually we need a space in which political parties come with programs that tackle some of the successes that happened in the past, including on the creation of indigenous banks that Andrew's talking about, because these banks actually generally succeeded. I'm really simply saying that, look, some of the failures that we're seeing in the last 10, 20 years were deliberate failures in some cases, but some of them were failures because of absence of policy. That these things can happen because they happened before, and we should be able to have a possibility of these things happening in the future.
Okay, policy. Mapenduzi, people are talking policy, policy this, policy that. Do you from the parliament sense, the current speaker one time, in my view, fundamentally described the parliament of Uganda and said the only thing that the parliament of Uganda cannot do, given its function, powerful, is that it cannot change a man into a woman. That's how powerful he described it to be. And then we are at a point, and I want to look at the leadership, because you said there is a big difference that the current leadership has brought to parliament, and I want to take you on from there. That going into 2022, do we see Parliament of Uganda with the new leadership beginning to put in place pro-people policies that can then support the economic transformation, lead Uganda into that, the development transformation that people are so much yearning for?
Charles, I have a lot of hope. The last few months that we have had the 11th Parliament, a lot of things have taken place, and I have seen the level of debate and the issues that are actually brought to Parliament, and I'm beginning to believe that the 11th Parliament is likely to be a lot more pro-people, a lot more listening, but also less extravagant. The image of Parliament, that confidence had been lost. And you see that confidence coming back. I think the current leadership of our Parliament are doing everything it takes to make sure that Parliament serves the interests of the citizens of Uganda. And many of us, the members of Parliament, are committed to that. But something I want to say, just as in relation to the policy issues you talked about, Uganda is known globally. I have been to a number of countries, and even in Rwanda. A friend of mine in Rwanda, that was around 2018, a friend of mine said, Uganda is known for very beautiful policies and laws, but you guys are known for abandoning your own policies and laws. And so it looks like other countries borrow from what we have struggled to make, and they make good use of it. And for us, we take it as business as usual. We are not likely to, yes, Parliament can be that vibrant and all that, but it starts from the top. Just like Larid Joseph put it, recently during the launch of the Anti-Corruption Week, many of us felt very concerned when the president made a statement that in a way watered down the momentum, the kind of energy that Honorable Betty Kamya was trying to demonstrate, coming in with that energy and trying to make things look different. And then the president says, and it sends a very bad message. Actually, that evening, I spent about 2-3 hours thinking, actually trying to figure out what exactly the president was trying to put across. And then to me, the question was, is this a message of defeatism? Is this a way of, it's quite frustrating. And so even if we have beautiful laws that can make this country go, several miles ahead, as long as we don't have that commitment, as long as that goodwill required for the implementation, as long as we don't have that, we are not likely to achieve much. But then,
but why don't you do your part?
Well,
and then you throw
well,
it back to the other side.
I will continue doing my part,
especially because you are an arm of government.
No, let me just say this. Let me just say this.
Autonomous arm of government, its own budget, its own plans, its own strategic direction, and all this. And we have 3 arms of government, and the legislature, even by the constitutional writing style, is actually number 1. In that, on that.
You are very right. You are very right, my brother
so
Charles.
Do your part as parliament, then let the judiciary do its part as the arbiter, then call out, because you even have that role actually, call out the executive and say, we have done this, the judiciary has done this, but you have failed to do 1, 2, 3, 4, so that then we don't have a cycle of then one day we shall hold them
my brother Charles, I fully agree with you, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Parliament. I am looking at this as a concerned citizen, but also as a leader. And I can tell you, as Parliament, we are committed. I am very committed to pursuing that direction. So we can hold the executive more accountable. We can be more connected to the local man and woman, so we can serve their interests. That is one thing. But what I am trying to say is, even if we decide to start to review, looking at the policies and where we have not gone, do we have the commitment? Do we have the goodwill? The same people doing the same thing and not bothered about mistakes? And there is a culture of negligence, and it is even worse with the civil service. It is even, yeah. So I think, and this problem is not likely to be just like Dr. Mohamuza, just like he put it. We are not likely to solve the problem now. It's not that Ugandans do not know what the problem is. We know the problem.
Okay.
We even know the solution, but we lack that goodwill.
Okay. I'm going to do this. Let me read just some 3, 4 comments to share with us the space with the outside world. Someone called Ivan says, Ugandans need to be enabled and empowered economically so that they can be innovative and developmental instead of fighting for a mere yalero, stealing Fred's mother's chicken, and at best aiming for political offices for survival. That's what Ivan says. And then Geoffrey in Bujiri says, Charles, thank you for that informative discussion. During Obote 1, workers through trade unions had a say in company management, and civil society, civil service was really operational. And then there is another one from someone called Wisdom. He says, Charles, oh, thanks. This is a compliment. Charles, your choice of guests during the show is the best ever. Thank you, Wisdom. You really have wisdom, now I can see. Then he or she says, Happy New Year to you and that team. Thanks for educating us through your show. Respect for you. Thanks a lot, Wisdom. And then what other message do we have here? People are talking about COVID. By the way, you need to, I think as you wind up, spare 30 seconds each in the 1 minute that you each have to make a comment on COVID and how we are going to, in your view, are we going to be opened come next week or the week after? Someone called Dr. Otim. Dr. Otim says, Charles, Mr. Joseph Otieno has given very useful information on UPE. You need to give him more time next time to discuss Uganda's education and suggestions on how we can improve UPE. Joseph, there you are. Someone is already advising me to welcome you back to the show to discuss the quality of UPE. I will do that at an appropriate time. And then the Dr. Otim also says, Andrew is very good today. Andrew, are there other days you are not very good? You need...
He's ending the year, so...
I'm here. Grandson
Andrew is ending the year, so...
I'm not always like this. Most of the times I'm worse.
I don't have time to sift through all the messages in order to present them, but let's start with Sarah. We are actually now into 30th of December, but Sarah, 1 minute.
Well, I would briefly talk about maybe in defense of Honorable Mapenduzi, because you put Parliament on the spot in fighting corruption. Yes, they have the oversight function, and where they've tried examples of URA handshake, Bank of Uganda inquiry, into the sale of indigenous banks that was found irregular. Nothing has been done to implement their findings. And the COVID inquiry, misuse of COVID funds. You said many people talked about COVID. I think it's important to remind viewers that after the first phase, even the money that was put aside in preparation for fighting the pandemic was squandered. And we have no visible preparation at all, yet the pandemic is still ongoing. It would be good also to hear about the surveillance teams, the preparation for reopening of schools, given that we are in the third wave with COVID, which seems to be everywhere, and we are sending our children back to school. We kept them at home when COVID infections were low. Now we are sending them when they are high. What is the preparedness of government on surveillance of schools and safety of the children of this country? But also, as I conclude, I think one of the major issues we forgot to talk about, and there are two in my view. One is the bickering between central government and Uganda Kingdom, with the controversy over Maryland that is properly provided for under Article 237 of the Constitution, under Section 31, 32, 35, 59, and 92 of the Land Act, and properly taken care of under the Land Amendment Act of 2010. Even the minister, went to an extent of declaring Uganda Land Board illegal, a function that is a preserve of courts of law. So you see complete absence of checks and balances in the debate and bickering between Uganda Kingdom and central government. If there are any reviews that are required legally, suggestions should be sent to Parliament, the honorable body mandated to make laws in this country. That bickering is unnecessary and is not good, especially given that we are going into the 60 years of independence. We know the controversy that we've had right at the time of independence, repeating elections for self-governance because Benchwanka had won, the controversy with Uganda Kingdom, the unending controversy that even led into the violence in Kayunga by-election, the power of might in Uganda, and we are likely to see this violence continuing, especially in by-elections in Uganda Kingdom. And citizens need to push back at that level of deterioration. The other disturbing issue is teenage pregnancies. I think as we reopen schools, it's important that we call upon all people in positions of responsibility to make sure that the girls that were defiled, raped, and violated during lockdown return to school, and we minimize the loss on generations and generations at that end.
I can promise that teenage pregnancy is one of those things we are going to discuss when the new year begins, and I have it in my plan. about 3 weeks ago, I attended a discussion. I actually moderated a whole day's discussion in Nebi that brought together leaders from West Nile, and it is bad. Yeah. About 44%, I think. Yeah. It stands at 44%, including, and you know, the act itself may not is terrible enough, but one of the things that comes out so terrible is that some law enforcers facilitate negotiation for against defilement victims, you know, and one of them, I think, was a girl of 2 years that was raped by a man of 27, and the family of the man paid 1 million shillings, and the police in the area knew about this in some place called Kuchwiny in Nebi district. And I gave plaudits to the RDC of Nebi. He decided to take the law into his hands and went and rearrested the man, and went and I think jailed him far away in Arua, about 80 kilometers away from Nebi. So that's how terrible the situation is. So it's a big discussion that we shall have.
Case of teenage pregnancy.
It's unimaginable. It's unimaginable, but that's life. Honorable Mapenduzi, your final take.
Well, from the discussion that we...
Keep it short.
Yes, I'll keep it very short. Thank you. You know, from all this discussion we have had, it's clear that Ugandans need to be a lot more interested and start to talk about the country we want. Start also to talk a lot more about the post-Museveni Uganda without fear, because at the end of the day, it is our country. We all need to live in safety and dignity, and it's important that even the next, transition has to be peaceful and all that. Okay. So it's important to talk about that. But coming to what is likely to happen in the next few weeks and so on, I think Ugandans have to know that, and we have read from different reports, the rate of infection is going high. And people need to get vaccinated.
Okay.
People need to get vaccinated. People need to be very cautious. We need to continue with the SOPs.
Okay.
And I want to see the Minister of Health, the Minister of Education, local governments across the country, and every citizen getting involved in preparing for the reopening of schools, if indeed the schools will be reopened.
Okay, thank you very much. Andrew.
For an old man of my advanced age, I'll pass it on to my grandson, Joseph, and my other grandson, Fred.
That's very kind of you. No, I think going forward, I hope that the new year is one in which Mr. Museveni, possibly at 40, reviews his position, creates a possibility for a national healing. Political parties in this country, all of them sit together and have a conversation, not only around COVID, but around a revival of our economy and reviving of our communities. And in so doing, we hope there's a genuine possibility of a debate about not only post-Museveni, but a post-NRM. But I hope very quickly that the judicial process will prevail in such a manner in which UPC emerges with one leader, and that leader is able to rejoin the mainstream political process, so that this political party can engage constructively with the rest of all of us to ensure that, well, this country is possible for our youth in future.
Thank you very much. Doctor?
I think 99% of Ugandans, their concern is the economy. The politics and security, of course, are in the neighborhood. They do disrupt their way of living. The main thing supposed to drive the economy is the mainstream of government. And I think that's the conversation that Mr. Museveni needs to have. How do you transform his government? Forgetting about the politicians and the security, there is a conversation out there. But I think there is a lot more to do in making sure the government, the mainstream of government, does the policies that are required to put an economy in place that will serve the population. So for me, community investments, that mean investments in the communities, is going to be very critical, and turning around government to do that is still going to be his challenge.
Okay.
And that's why the conversation between security and development is becoming an agenda. The policy development model is a way to go. A lot of resistance on it, and Mr. Museveni must drive that through as part of the transformation of his government to build an economy that works for the people.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhumuza. Thank you very much, Joseph Ochieno. Thank you a lot, Andrew Mwenda. Thanks a lot, Honorable Mapenduzi. And thank you very much, Sarah Birete. Thanks to the entire panel, and thanks to the technical team here, the producers. Let me give you a thanks for the whole 2021, the entire team, Morris, William, Bills, Fred, Etiang, all the rest, Ivan, Margaret, and the entire team that ensured that we do these shows each Wednesday without missing. I want to thank you all very much, and thanks especially to you out there, the audience that follows this discussion and engages with us. Most important, as we go home for the end of year, remember that COVID still exists and the infection rate is high. So keep yourself safe, follow the SOPs, and don't drop your guard. Until next year, next Wednesday, 2022. Bye-bye. God bless you all.
Transact and win money after money with Airtel Money. 1.5 billion shillings in cash prizes up for grabs.
My name is Mulage Swahod from Tororo District. I'm so happy that I'm a lucky winner of the 10 million Uganda shillings Man After Money promotion with Airtel. I can't believe it. It's just like I've been reborn. It's the best day of my life.
The more you transact, the higher your chances of winning. Airtel Money. Instant, secure, borderless.
Everyone deserves more this festive season, which is why MTN Momo is giving you more Senkyu points on your MTN Momo withdrawals at agent locations. Get 150 Senkyu points for every 1,000 shillings spent in withdrawal fees. More Senkyu points means you get more free minutes, more free MBs, more free SMSs, and more free Momo Pay shopping. To use your Senkyu points, dial *141#.
Everywhere you go, MTN.